Hi, I'm Mark Baum, CCO for FMI Inc., formerly known as the Food Marketing Institute, and this is CPGGUYS podcast.
Welcome to the CPGGUYS podcast. Your hosts, Shri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG guys.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of the CPG Guys. I'm, of course, Shri, co-founder, co-host of the CPG Guys, co-founder and partner of ThinkBlue. Your key to unlocking your profitability potential is builders, connectors, and amplifiers. We shape the future of commerce to drive your growth. Please do listen to my older daughter, Ria Raj's music at www.riaraj.com. That's RHERAJ. My younger daughter, Lara Raj, is a member of the Geffen Records Universal Music Group Cat's Eye. They've just completed their tour of the Jingle Ball series. The hit single Touch is now past 200 million plays on Spotify, Apple, etc. We're off to Tokyo. We're off to Sydney. And my wife and I are looking forward to seeing them perform. Not joining me today is my fellow co-founder, Peter V.S. Bond. And when he's not co-hosting this podcast, he serves as head of client engagement at Flywheel, the e-com acceleration division of Omnicom. Before we get to our guest, we want to ask you to consider following us in your preferred podcast listening app if you already don't do so. This ensures you automatically receive new episodes as they release, and while you're at it, please do follow our sister podcast, the FMCG Guys, the CPG Scoop. And now announcing the first retail media executive education program in our industry. From May 5th to 8th, 2025 at Cornell Tech, the CPG Guys are strategic partners with Cornell University for this immersive 4-day program that brings together industry thought leaders and renowned faculty to share best practices for building compelling retail media platforms. You will discover how to collaborate in creating best-in-class tech stacks, measure performance to ensure brands access the necessary KPIs based on campaign objectives, and establish strong partnerships between brands and retailers. In addition, the program will cover optimizing brand strategies using AI-driven campaign design at scale to achieve marketing tactics and goals. Links to our podcast, our sister cast, social media profiles of my daughters Ria and Lara. For more information on Cornell's retail media program with us, you can find it in the digital liner notes of the episode. Now, the moment we've been waiting for, the main event. This episode, I have a very special guest, one that I have over the years followed closely and partnered with, and I'll say it publicly, one that I've admired with. I've admired the company that he works for as well, association, I should say. He's CCO at none other than FMI, the Food Industry Association. What do they do? FMI, of course, is a food industry association, provides leadership to retailers, wholesalers of food, beverage, and consumer products, along with their manufacturer, supplier, trading partners, by facilitating growth and collaboration and promoting their role in feeding humans, let's say families, and enriching lives. Mark, it's both a pleasure and an honor to have you on the CPG Guys. Thank you for joining me. That too generous of you to do it a day before Christmas Eve. Welcome to the CPG Guys.
Thanks so much, Shri. It's my pleasure to be here, and happy holidays to all your podcast viewers and listeners out there, and congratulations to Cat's Eye on their phenomenal success. Looking forward to a really happy holiday season as we sprint towards year end in the food industry, but it's my pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you for joining me, Mark. The food industry has gone through a little bit of turmoil last 24 months, but we'll talk to that during the Q&A segment. But thank you for that quick hello back to me. But before we get started with our Q&A segment here, could you kindly give us a quick overview at FMI and what it serves and what your role as CCO entails?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the Cliff Notes version, although I think you did a great job of explaining who we are in your opening statement, is that we are an international trade association. We represent companies and all the individuals employed by those companies. And in our case, that's fast-moving consumer goods companies, retailers, wholesalers, and then we've got a huge bevy of service providers and technology partners as well. And we do all of that in the service to the industry to advance our collective interests as an industry, in some cases to deflect criticism or unwanted regulation or other onerous burdens that are placed on the industry. But ultimately, Shri, we're a trade association that, working with and through our members, serve consumers. That's our number one job, is to take care of our mutual customers, those consumers and their families and their communities.
There's no doubt about it, Mark. At the end of the day, our mission number one, you, me, the entire industry, brands, retailers, doesn't matter. As long as we keep focused and really delivering for the consumer, this industry will continue to be a better place than it has been for decades and centuries at this point. So thank you for that overview. In the digital liner notes of this episode, of course, we'll include links to your LinkedIn profile, Mark, of course, FMI's website, as well as LinkedIn page for our listeners to access while we go on with our conversation on the go. So, a lifetime of leadership, not just FMI, but lifetime. I use those words very carefully. Take us through the years, Mark, and then what got you or brought you to FMI?
It's really, leadership is really the culmination of a lifetime of lessons, if you really think about it. Lessons learned and applied along the way. Going back to my retail days in high school, working, in the service deli. I think I fell in love with the industry all the way back then. Then had the good pleasure of working for a snack food distributor in Brooklyn in my early days. I like to say I'm a recovering snack food and candy distributor who lived to tell the tale. Some days were harrowing, but I learned so much about the business there, just, in terms of procurement, in terms of selling, in terms of customer service, in terms of finance. All of those things at a very young age really helped me shape my view of the industry. And literally 40 some odd years later, here I am. So it's been a wonderful path. I've had some great mentors along the way. Early on in my career, I was able to kind of climb up on the backs of giants and stand on their shoulders. They were willing to take a risk on me. And then that allowed me to learn how to take risks on others and work with others and leading from, a variety of capacities and positions. You don't always just lead from out front. Sometimes you lead from the side or the flank. You need to know what motivates people, inspires them, and compels them to act. So applying all of that with great colleagues over the years has really taken me on the journey of a lifetime in this industry all over the world. As to how I got to FMI, well, that's kind of a funny thing. I was in consulting and have had a long-standing relationship with the organization. I went to my first FMI convention back in the day in like the late 70s, not long after the organization was formed. I knew a lot about it. And with our consulting firm, we facilitated the strategic planning process for FMI back in 2012 and 2013, really their first blueprint for the future. And then I'll just say I did the one thing a good consultant should never do. I actually signed up for the implementation of the plan. So here I am 10 years later. I lead our commercial practice, if you will. That's the business of the business. So we interact with the leadership of the industry to identify the most important issues that need to be addressed at scale. We prioritize those issues, and then we get about working with our members as trading partners, as individual industry segments, along with a number of our advisory partners to help lead the way towards large-scale transformational change. And that takes place in a variety of ways that I'm sure we'll probably talk about.
That large-scale transformational change you speak to, Mark, is no easy feat, right? You're challenged every single day, whether it's brands, retailers, creating value for them, but most importantly, you work with several stakeholders. I do remember fondly my first job in retail when I got out of college. I was in this, as you know, in the snack and beverage business for PepsiCo, running a route. I learned more, I got to tell you, in those first few days running a route about the store than I pick up now looking at a scorecard. That said, Mark, talk to us about one or two leadership principles that anchor you every day managing this diverse group of stakeholders that you have to.
That's a great question, Sri. And it is challenging. I know as a consultant how much pride and pleasure I got out of helping a client move the business, right? And that's just inside the four walls. Now, think about moving an industry. It's exponentially harder to do. You've got a diverse set of stakeholders, all ostensibly coming together for a common purpose, but you have to stay grounded in it and you have to keep your eyes on the prize. And there's definitely a lot of frustration inherent in that process. And you can't let the frustration get in the way of your achieving your objectives. So I guess for me, the guiding principles around leadership are what I call the 3 Ps. One is purpose. Always have that purpose. That's why you get out of bed in the morning. And to your point about walking a store versus looking at a scorecard, everybody's got a mission and a vision. That's not the same thing as purpose. Purpose is why you get out of bed in the morning. The second is passion. You have to have an abiding passion for this business, and that keeps you true to the cause, and it helps you fight through all the challenges that come at you, sometimes the inertia that sets in, and all of the other obstacles in your path. And the last, and I think this is really important and often overlooked, is pride. We should feel really proud of what we do as an industry. This is a noble industry. We take it, you said it earlier, we feed families, we enrich lives, we take care of society. This is fundamental. Maslow's hierarchy of needs has food as one of those three fundamental principles of the human condition. So that to me is kind of my North Star. And that's what keeps me going through it all.
So awesome to hear, Mark. I personally, again, opinion on one, loved that over COVID, there weren't conference rooms for meetings where brands and retailers, we talked to each other. We were able to get in front of the store. That's why for 2 years, every single meeting were. And I'll tell you something, Mark, when you stand in front of that shelf, it always reveals a new truth that you did not discover on a scorecard. I know we're returning back to the conference room model entirely instead of being in front of the store, but I encourage all leaders in America, brand or retail, really doesn't matter. The more time you spend in store, the more you're going to learn, the more you can do what you and I have already concurred is our mission, which is deliver for the consumer. But Mark, that very responsibility in the industry you speak to means we have that ownership of the responsibility to continue to feed families in America as an industry. Each one of us has a role in that. Some may say, hey, my role is to produce. Another one may say, my role is to transport. Another might say, my role is to stock product. Another may say sell. Another, another may be marketing. We play the role of media. You play the role of advocacy and partnerships. But you get to see, as a result of advocacy and partnerships, challenges in the industry. As 2024 comes to a close, one of those profound ones is volume. That's not the only one, though. So I'd love to hear from you, Mark. What's on your mind in terms of industry challenges? Is there very few closer to those? You get to hear all sides of the fence. And what are today's challenges for retail that really need to be addressed in 2025?
Sure. Maybe I'll go from macro to micro, but I do want to make just one comment about retail, because it's, as A.G. Lafley, the retired CEO of P&G, once said, when that consumer's standing at the shelf, that's the moment of truth. Or to paraphrase the bard, Shakespeare, that's where they decide to buy or not to buy. So it's critically important. There's no substitute for that. Or sticking with kind of my wonky analogies here, as I always say, you have to understand retail, because that's where, anything is possible. Or as Mary Poppins once said, even the impossible. So there's no substitute for it. But taking a step back from that, if I look at the challenges that we confront as an industry today, first of all, at a macro level, and you sort of insinuated this earlier on, Tree, we are in an age of ongoing uncertainty, ambiguity, volatility, and instability. And that's anathema to the historic workings of our industry. But we've been in that state for several years now, and we've managed to work through it. But again, it continues to change. We have a new political administration coming into the U.S. We can talk a little bit more about that later. There's political change sweeping the globe. There are new sort of economic alliances. There's coupling, uncoupling, recoupling of economic partnerships. So we're dealing with that on a macro level. And that, not having a clear line of sight to those outcomes, that presents challenges. Competition, of course, is the ongoing challenge, both traditional competition and non-traditional competition, new players. When somebody asks me these days, like, so who's in the food business? I kind of rhetorically respond, who's not? Everybody's in it. Everybody wants trips. Everybody wants to be in that business. And so that's given rise to a whole new slew of non-traditional food retailers, both in brick and mortar, digital, hybrid, omnichannel, et cetera. And that means that there's going to be more disruption, and there's going to be more disintermediation. There's going to be more concentration and more consolidation. So those are definitely ongoing challenges that we need to look out and across the industry landscape and figure out how we're going to be successful and make our members successful going forward. The last challenge is, to me, both the challenge and the opportunity, because it's the most important one, and that's the market of one, and that's the consumer. So, we talked about the consumer being sort of at the center of a circular value chain, but they're humans. So they're not completely predictable. In fact, as Dan Ariely says, they're predictably irrational. Just when you think you've got them figured out, they go and do something else or behave differently. Sometimes they're really inscrutable. They're harder to find. They're harder to reach. And, getting to that market of one, we are an industry that came of age during the Industrial Revolution based on a mass production platform. And now we have to get to that degree of personalization. So we have to go beyond the household. We literally need to get to individuals and what's driving them on their path to purchase. So that's the challenge, and that's the opportunity, because to your point, if we take care of those customers, we'll be around for the foreseeable future.
Well said, indeed, Mark. But you referred there, two things kind of surfaced to the top of my head. One is the political change, not just a US phenomenon, but a global phenomenon. So we should probably talk about that and why that matters, especially since this is the food business. And then the second one I wanted to briefly touch was the surface level of inflation. Inflation has hit us hard over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, nothing new here. You can say, thanks, Einstein, but nothing new here. That said, Mark, we are now lapping 2 years of increased costs, increased prices, things of that nature. So if I wore a retailer manufacturer lens, is 2025 the year where we, as a consumer, we have no choice but just to, I would say, adapt and accept the inflated level of pricing? Or are we still struggling with volume and it's going to continue to be a challenge overall?
Yeah, let me back out to the first question, because that'll kind of take us into the discussion on inflation. The political environment has changed. Back in 2016, when Donald Trump was running for president in the U.S., that notion of populism was almost novel at the time. Now it's not. It's gone mainstream. It's sweeping the globe. If you look at elections in India, in the UK, in the EU, now you look at what's happening in individual member companies in the EU. Two of the most important, Germany and France, are really, really, really struggling. So it's not just kind of a novel idea. Populism is sweeping the globe. And I think the difference this time, Shri, and in the past is this wave of populism is a little bit less reliable when it comes to sort of the outlook on business. So, for example, populism associated with the Republican Party to a large degree in the U.S., Republicans could somewhat reliably be counted on to be more business friendly. Regulation was responsible, less burdensome. Not so much these days. I mean, there's a lot of distrust of business, particularly big business. We saw that. The living proof of that was kind of the blowback we got on the proposed Albertson-Kroger merger. So it's going to be hard to say how it will manifest itself going forward, but we're going to have to be up on our toes, particularly given the emphasis that this incoming administration has placed on, their slogan of Make America Healthy Again, a lot of pressure on food per se, particularly ultra-processed food and highly refined ingredients. We have some ideas about how we can advance our agenda and have a seat at the table and make our points known, but that remains to be seen in the months ahead. With regard to inflation, you can talk about the genesis of it. A lot of folks in this industry have never lived it. I mean, the last time we had this kind of inflation was back during the 1970s. So a lot of food industry leaders had never even lived through, much led through.
Mark, I don't mean to interrupt you, but what you just mentioned is something pretty profound. Not that I want to use the word profound for everything here, but when you haven't experienced it in a 2 or 3 decade career, it's tough. And you're 100% right. That's what we're going through. I had never experienced this level of inflation and managing to it in 3 decades in CPG.
No, in fact, we went through a very, very extended period of deflation in CPG. Listen, first of all, we're also a highly efficient business. We deliver food from farm to fork for less than 10 cents of your after-tax dollar in this country. We are the envy of the world.
Hard for the mind to the mind takes that for granted when you stand in front of the shelf and you expect to buy something for $4.99, but the way you describe it, Just think about that for a second, Mark. For less than a dime, you can't get a piece of chewing gum for a dime.
Even our colleagues over the pond don't have that kind of efficiency built into their system. Now, it's of little comfort when you still see the price of eggs shoot up or milk or bread. I mean, we look at the price of staples as kind of the baseline, and we don't want to see what I'll call accessible proteins, low-priced proteins become inaccessible. Particularly, we have a lot of food insecurity in this country to begin with, too much as it is right now. Having said all that, these factors, these levers caused inflation, and we've been living with it for a couple of years. Unfortunately, it kind of coincided with going into a political season, so it became a political punching bag in some ways for both parties at this point in time. And as one of our economist advisors says all the time, inflation goes up like a rocket and comes down like a feather. So it's taking some time. We continue to advise through our platforms to consumers to, see that inflation actually has come down. You're still paying more, but not as much as you were. You paid less for Thanksgiving dinner this year than you paid last year. It's going to be tough, and we have the sort of the threat of looming tariffs and trade considerations that could provide a huge spike in input costs. We have the immigration and labor issue. These are all variables, Sri, that could be with us for a while. But I don't accept the fact that consumers have to accept the fact that this is just the way it's going to be. We're going to do everything within our power to narrow the spread between the PPI and the CPI and continue to produce, quality, nutritious, delicious foods that Americans can afford and have access to.
Mark, as I think through that inflation issue, the number one thing that surfaces to the top of my head is we're so focused right now, as you mentioned correctly, on the political rhetoric, on something huge and macro. And as you've already pointed out, inflation tends to come down like a feather, not like a rocket, right? In that sort of scenario, what I've urged brands and retailers over the last 2-3 years to think about is how you solve opening price points at the micro level versus trying to solve every price point, every pack size, every aisle, figure out the staples that used to feed America's families every single day, fix the opening price point. It's better than lethargy and no action. And then build from there, make a 5-year plan. Do nothing doesn't work. Do too much doesn't result in outcomes, but I look forward to that as I move to the next one, Mark. This one's an obvious one. No senior leader in the industry today can get around the word retail media. Love it, hate it. It's really occupying mindshare, whether it's delivering against that or whether it should, all debatable. And that's the question I'm going to ask you. Demystify, does it deserve to occupy the level of mindshare that it does? What matters here? Why is retail media so important? Because there is no conversation I have in the industry where someone doesn't tell me, hey, you're an expert. Why don't you tell me something about retail media? What should I do? And I'm like, you've got 7 other things to worry about.
Yeah, so you're right. You can't escape it. You can't have a conversation without this topic coming up, and it's top of mind for senior executives throughout the industry on both sides of the desk, as well as a number of third parties who have a stake in this game. Let me start with why it's so important, right? Is this just another iteration we've been spending in media as long as we've been around, brand building, building equity in those consumer relationships, leading towards transactions? It's so important because I'll go back to something I said earlier, Sri, this level of personalization, this market of one, how do you reach consumers? Media has been fragmenting. Traditional media has been fragmenting for years. And then we saw a proliferation of cable and then social, et cetera. And now it's not fragmenting. It's splintered. It's shattered into a million different pieces. So how do you reach those consumers? Well, retailers have them as their customers. They've got those captive. You go into a big box retailer and they've got literally, tens to hundreds of millions of customers coming through their door. That's very, very, very attractive. Now, the question is, how do you reach them in a meaningful way? How does the retailer monetize? How does the CPG company get ROI? Those are very sort of nascent questions right now. We're in this embryonic stage where it's really accelerated exponentially the last couple of years, and capabilities are starting to ramp up some. Again, retailers are, for the most part, not traditional marketers in the sense that they don't have that sort of, classic CMO agency outlook. So in some cases, they're learning those skills. Within CPG, you know very well through your own career, Shri, you've seen it go from pull to push and now maybe back again. Where's the money going to come from? Is it a reallocation of consumer dollars, or does it come from partially, what's been allocated for trade on the push side? Where in the funnel does it come from? How do you measure your success? What are the agreed upon KPIs? How do you make use of the data, which to me is really the currency in all of this, first party and otherwise? All of those things are starting to be mapped out, because otherwise, it's not going to be kind of the bright, shiny new toy forever, and it's not going to have legs and staying power unless we figure it out. FMI is working really hard with some of our partners to really both demystify it as well as kind of organize it, activate it in a way that we democratize the opportunity for members on both sides of the desk. We're not just making the business case, we're defining kind of the roadmap. We're getting to a common language. We may not get to standards per se, but I think we'll get to standardization. And I think that will help the industry going forward. So much more to come over the next couple of years, and much more to come from us. But right now, for those who are still on the sidelines, it's getting late in the game already. You better get in, you better get on the field, and you better come up to speed in a hurry.
Thank you for that. Now, Mark, you were here on the show maybe a couple months ago in November around the Thanksgiving timeframe with Liz Buchanan from Nielsen IQ. Y'all spoke of a report to be published at the release of this recording. It'll only be a couple weeks away from FMI Midwinter. Y'all are releasing a report, very high level, Mark. What can the industry expect?
Yeah, we're real excited about this, and we're thrilled to be partnering with Liz and her team at NIQ. We will be publishing around towards the end of January. We'll also be presenting to our board, to the members in attendance at FMI Midwinter and the like. I think you'll see three high-level components to this report. One, really just kind of what's the story about retail media, right? It's not just the networks, it's the strategy, it's all of the components, why it's important, what it's about. We're going to provide a forecast where we think this is going to go over the next several years. Then we're going to get into some of the details around the framework for retail media. So the first part will really be for executives. Here's a good summary. Here's what you need to socialize with your team. The second part's going to be for what I'll call sort of the practitioners, the folks who are on either side of that desk and some of their third-party providers. Here's the framework. Here's how we need to be thinking about it in that level of detail. And then the last piece is really just going to be kind of a glossary of terms so that we do have a common language, so that we're all talking about the same thing. And then we're going to build on that from there. But there's been a lot sort of written about retail media over the last couple of years. There's a lot of noise. This will attempt to break through the clutter and be very, very specifically oriented towards the FMI membership and the industry at large.
I, for one, will be looking forward to reading that report, Mark. And you're always welcome to come back on the CPG Guys and share it as well, which I'm 100% sure we will find a way to partner with you and do that and speak to the different outcomes. But let's take a minute to actually get into the depths of FMI itself and the different pillars, who it serves, each of the pillars, who do you interact with on every single day? And then I have a follow-up question to that really for brands. But first, why don't you take us through the different pillars and who your stakeholders are and how you engage with them?
Let me say this. In terms of how we view the pillars, we have three lenses on the world. We advocate, we educate, and we collaborate. And I might add a fourth, we also communicate, right? So that's, advocacy is interacting with government for the most part at the federal, state, and local level. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we identify stakeholders. We educate. We have a large portfolio of educational events, in-person, virtual, and otherwise. We have a lot of tools there. We also have a lot of research, close to 50 pieces of research originally produced each year.
Hey, Mark, if I can just understand on the advocate part, your partners from brands and retailers, are they primarily commercial folks or are they the industry relations and government affairs?
So on the advocacy piece, we work with we work with our leadership, CEOs, who help to identify and prioritize the issues. And then it's their public policy people working with our very extensive public policy team, our government relations folks, that really roll up their shirt sleeves, get into the regulatory agencies, work with lawmakers on Capitol Hill, with the White House, increasingly in today's world with state houses as well, municipalities, State's Department of Health. So it's really the experts in the field, Sri.
I'd say, Mark, the industry takes the advocacy a lot for granted. The brands that I've worked with, arguably $1 trillion of market cap across all of them, it was not an area we often spoke to, but took for granted that FMI was doing. I'd urge brands to do a better job of working with you on the commercial side to really get into details. And maybe there are better outcomes to be scripted.
Thank you for that, Sri. I'll say this, though. So for small companies, we are their advocacy. They don't have the depth to field people in Washington, maybe in state houses as well. And for our larger members, like some of your former employers, I mean, they've got, in some cases, they may have a larger staff in Washington than we do. But in many respects, we're small but mighty because we work with all of them. And that way we leverage that collective interest as well as all the local stakeholders who are voters in the districts of our legislators. So thank you for that.
To me, Mark, working with you on advocacy is a collective voice as opposed to an individual voice for one issue. And I think that's the difference brands need to understand and embrace and up the ante in this particular area.
Yeah, I think you're right, Sri. And I'll say this. While large companies can do a lot for themselves, they don't necessarily want to be on the sharp end of those issues. And that's why FMI as a collective can be the umbrella under which they gather. Sometimes it's the shield, and sometimes it's the point of the spear, depending on the issue and the position we take. So that's advocacy. Talked a little bit about education. And then we communicate. We are the voice of the industry to a variety of stakeholders, and I'll get into the stakeholders in a second. And then, importantly, we collaborate. And by that, I mean, and we've been talking about that really, we bring the industry together under the auspices of FMI to identify the most important issues. Some of them are short-term, 12 to 24 months. Some of them are longer term. What do we need to accomplish over the 2020s, et cetera? And then those pillars are built around this blueprint of issues. So in no particular order, supply chain. We've been through a lot of trials and tribulations. We need to future-proof the supply chain workforce, an ongoing and will be a perpetual challenge. We've come out of the sort of the hiring crisis of COVID. But, when you were talking about various roles and responsibilities, I'm a selector, I'm a driver, I'm a store-level employee, I'm a merchant. That workforce is changing. The work itself is changing. The nature of the workforce is changing, and the workplace is changing. Big issue for us. Society and marketplace dynamics. We alluded to this earlier, Sri. Big issue for us, both in terms of competition, the way people behave in society, and the way they interact with our members. Big issue. Sustainability has gone from sort of off stage to close to center stage. Issues like, climate and carbon management and scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions are now really important, not just if you're a publicly traded regulated company, but even if you're a small company, because your lenders want to know, your risk managers want to know, your employees want to know. By the way, your kids want to know, your families, they're driving a lot of those changes today. Your values as a company are as important as the value of the products and services you're providing. Certainly the consumer is the beginning and end. So consumerism is an ongoing, perpetual, imperative issue. You can never know enough about your consumer. We focus a lot of our research on that. And then in the center of all of it is technology. Technology is the great enabler, and it touches every facet, not just of our businesses, but of our lives as well. And if you're not technology enabled or driven, you're going to be competitively disadvantaged. Our stakeholders, so government. Talked a little bit about this earlier. Federal, state, local officials, all aspects. Other, what I'll call non-government organizations, the NGOs, are stakeholders in our industry. The media, both trade and business media. The analysts who are looking after and evaluating companies' performance. The institutional investors who are investing in those companies. And lenders, financial institutions. And importantly and increasingly, consumers themselves. They're stakeholders, and we have a role to communicate directly to them when need be, particularly as we, reassure them during COVID. We've had them maintain confidence in the value chain, even through this extended period of inflation. We've had some food safety issues. We want to assure them of the quality of the safety of the products that they're buying, their accessibility, and their not just their nutritional value, but their nourishment. They don't just nourish our bodies; they feed our souls as well. So that's probably the most important stakeholder.
Wow. Let me remind the public that I'm speaking to Mark Baum, CCO at FMI, the Food Industry Association. So I'm going to jump to an area where I personally believed deeply in, Mark, which was brands should be investing more with FMI, should have a bigger presence at your events. It is an opportunity, after all, for brands to showcase themselves to retailers as the biggest, the mightiest, or even mid-tier, really doesn't matter. So how do you accomplish outreach to brands? How do you accomplish outreach to retailers? Why should brands invest more with you? I for one, did believe is a sensible thing to do. The first thing I did, if you remember, when I got this role, this past role, was indeed make that change happen. So I'm curious, in your mind, what you'd say to brands, and then how do you accomplish outreach?
So, yeah, thanks for that, Sri. I'm going to use you as an example, actually, because you did. When you first got to General Mills, you said, we need to show up differently as a company. We're a household name. We're a big brand company, but we don't show up that way and we don't come across that way. And we need to change that. So what better place, I think I responded to you, than with and through FMI. We've got the right platforms for companies to show up in much more meaningful ways and demonstrate not just what their products are about, but who they are and where they're coming from and why it's important within that trading partner relationship and to take it to the next level of collaboration. It's one of the things I think, Sri, that we are particularly good at doing. And that is convening the industry, not just at scale collectively, but between trading partners. We have a very robust scheduling platform for joint business planning. We'll have at our event next month in Florida, we'll have literally thousands of individual joint business planning meetings taking place between retailers and manufacturers, and in some cases between knowledge partners and service providers as well. It's a very, very sophisticated, robust, safe, secure way of making that happen. So we bring the industry together both at scale and individually. And we reach out on a regular basis. We try to keep our finger on the pulse of the most important issues that get past just sort of the day to day. Okay. Here's what we're doing on, a new product introduction, or we've got some order to cash issues, or, here's our opening. And we didn't really get to opening price points, but it was a great point that you made earlier, or promotional plans. It's really strategically, where do we want to be? And what would we look like if we were one vertically integrated company acting in the best interest of our consumer? We are really good at doing that kind of stuff. And so we work hard to convince, the industry, both fast moving consumer goods companies and retailers to come together and work with FMI. I'm really proud to say probably, from a retail standpoint, we've got the vast majority of all commodity volume represented in both traditional and non-traditional grocers and food retailers. And we've got a huge number in CPG as well. And making the decision to get vertically integrated back in 2020 and bringing CPG players to the table with all the same rights, roles, and responsibilities as retailers turned out to be a really prescient thing. So I think we're well positioned to do even more of that going forward.
That is so good to hear, Mark. One area that we didn't touch upon that I think some portion of our audience is service providers. They could be tech companies. You mentioned order to cash. They could be just a builder of a software. They could be a hardware builder. And they use our platform to really build their education around the issues and the challenges and the opportunities in the industry, both retail and brands. So can you talk through your relationship with service providers and why they should be coming to you?
Sure. I guess I'll parse it a little bit, Sri. I'll talk about our knowledge partners, advisory partners. So those are the marquee consulting firms and we are blessed to have them as partners working with us to help, again, move the industry by providing really far-reaching thought leadership, understanding, the issues and what they mean and what their implications and impacts are going to be. So we have a very, very robust portfolio of thought leadership beyond just the research. Lots of frameworks and methodologies and benchmarks that we do in a sort of what I'll call non or pre-competitive way. And then, of course, we love having all these tech service providers and solution providers with FMI as well. Because first of all, there's so many of them now. That's proliferated a lot as technologies become more embedded in the industry, and our members rely on us to help sort through all that, right? Not necessarily give the good housekeeping seal of approval on a technology provider, but better understand what the application is, whether it's, a newfangled piece of hardware, it's a bright, shiny new toy, or it's a new software platform or service platform, or whatever that happens to be. And we work very closely with a number of technology companies. We actually created an event within Midwinter. We call FMI Tech at Midwinter for those companies. We're now doing pitch competitions, which has been sort of game changing for the folks who get into that and get to the finals, and especially the winners. So the technology solution providers have a critical role. They are integral to our success at FMI and working with us to help enable our members.
No doubt about it whatsoever, Mark. You briefly touched upon political change in the world, political change in the government, and my question is a very simple one. With an administration change at this point, just a few weeks away, let's say 4 weeks away at this point, how are y'all at FMI preparing to engage with the constituents you serve? Are there notable remarks you need to make? Is there a white paper? Is there a study? Is there something you're putting out there? I'm just curious to learn how you engage.
The short answer is yes, all of the above. Let me take you back, Sri. Pre-election.
I just feel you'd say all of the above.
Pre-election, we had like 6 or 8 what-if scenario plans going, right? Okay. So now we got the answer to that question. So we know what we've got in terms of government with an incoming administration. There was a lot already on our plates. I mean, there were over 50 regs that either coming at us or we're in the throes of working with and through to get to compliance. There's going to be, legislation produced over the next 12 to 24 months because a new administration really has that 2-year window before you get to midterms. We know that, there's going to be lots of changes over at Health and Human Services, assuming that President-elect Trump's nominees are confirmed. And over at FDA, we definitely have been advocating for reform for some time at FDA. We look forward to working with this administration to effecting that plan. We have decades and decades of experience in working with those agencies. And so we want to have a seat at the table to explain where we are and what we would like to see happen. And we are, I'll say, cautiously optimistic that will occur in some way, shape, or form. We're still trying to work through some of the onerous regulation coming at us. There's a January 2026 compliance date for the most far-reaching piece of the Food Safety Modernization Act, and that's the end-to-end FSMA Rule 204 traceability requirements. Very, very complex, very difficult, very costly, even for the largest companies. And the list of those items that are on FDA's radar from an end-to-end traceability standpoint is extensive. So we still have a lot of work to do there. We have issues with EPA that are coming at us. I mean, it's really across the board. And it's going to be interesting to see how the president-elect's healthcare agenda is going to be played out and the role we're going to play in that as well. We've doubled down on issues like food as medicine and health and well-being. And, the whole healthcare system with healthy payment cards and the like, and longevity issues are all front and center, I think. And I think we're going to work really, really hard to be a part of that conversation and see that enacted over the next couple of years with this.
No doubt about it, Mark. I do look forward to what the positive change will be. One thing I worry about is indirect inflation. We have a tendency to discuss direct inflation and pricing, but indirect inflation, traceability may just cause indirect inflation due to the cost of implementing outcomes. So I'm curious about trends in the industry. How does FMI stay abreast of trends in the industry? How do you do? And if so, how do you train your staff? And then personally, Mark, what are 1 or 2 trends that are top of mind for you outside of retail media?
Yeah, so great question. And, and it's interesting you asked that, Sri, because a number of our members actually rely on us to look up and out on their behalf. Particularly in the trade. I mean, there are obviously exceptions, and I'm always in awe of retailers because they're the greatest merchants on the planet. right? I mean, they literally they know what's in every aisle, what's given over to every end cap, what they're hedging for the price of gasoline. I mean, they are hands-on merchants. But when it comes to looking up and out, they rely on us. How do we do that? Well, we are very fortunate because we have some amazing marquee strategy firms who do that for a living, both with individual clients and for themselves. And we're fortunate in that they provide a lot of that to us, and working together, it allows us to do the kind of conceptual thinking and strategic planning that is so important for industry. So we create a 3 to 5 year strategic plan, but we think in terms of 10 and 20 and 30 years out. What's this going to look like? And then we work back from that. We scour what's available in the public view. You can't be successful in our business, which is kind of like advisory, unless you're a voracious reader. You have just got to be on that 24/7. And my folks will tell you all the time, I don't know that I'm famous, probably infamous for like sending 24/7, all hours of the day, white papers, thought leadership from a variety of places. Also, you have to look across industries and channels as well. Not everything was invented in the food industry, and we're not necessarily bleeding or even leading edge on issues. And coming from consulting, I have the distinct privilege of looking across industries and borrowing best practices from everyone, including financial services and risk to telco and technology to life science and healthcare and hospitality and travel, and applying it to our business. And so that's another thing that we do. We bring those adjacencies, say product space, consumer facing, and some of the leading practices from those businesses into our business and expose our members to those as well. With our people, in addition to all of that, we invest in them. I mean, they're our greatest asset. So we provide a lot of education and training and professional development across the board.
Awesome, Mark. I wouldn't have expected any less. So let's wrap this up with an obvious question, which is, the mind gears when we think FMI to midwinter in January in Florida. Arguably one of your largest programming events, but you are on 24/7, you're programming all year. Talk to us about all year. Who should take advantage of what?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for that, Shri, because I think a lot of people, again, FMI is synonymous with midwinter, but it's an event. it's our shiniest jewel in the crown in many respects, but it's an event. We have an event calendar that runs from January through December. It's available at FMI.org. We run over a dozen in-person events.
Can anybody access that calendar just by going to the website?
Yeah. Just go, FMI.org. And it's probably up on one of the marquees up top. If not, you can just put FMI event calendar into the search bar at the top of the screen. And we will, and it'll come up. You'll see all of our events.
We will make sure to put it in the digital liner notes of the podcast.
That'll be great. And I don't know if people realize we have events in things like fresh foods, which is a major industry event, private brands, non-foods, then across functional areas of the business like legal and regulatory compliance, financial management, energy and store development, asset protection, grocery resilience, risk management. All those are events that we do over the course of the year. And we do a big event through our food safety business, SQF, Safe Quality Food Institute. We certify facilities, and they do a big event as well. The other thing I'll just mention, Shri, in addition to the events, and we do a lot of online stuff. Now, in today's world, I don't know how many, podcasts and webinars and on-demand education and training features that we do throughout the course of the year. We have a lot of social platforms as well. And then I think I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of research. We have our signature research, which is the consumer trends piece, and the food industry speaks piece, which is what's on the mind of executives. And then we have our Power Of series that really goes wall to wall across all product categories and functional areas of the business. We do a lot of industry research across business operations and specific functional areas. And then we do a lot of consumer research, as I said earlier, on everything from consumer attitudes to emerging issues and special topics as well. And we will have a large research and insights calendar placed up there as well.
Awesome. So we will make sure to share the link to that calendar as well. So let me remind our audience that you can find all of our content simply by going to a web browser and typing cpgguys.com as the URL. And if you or your company has thought leadership to contribute to our community discussion on brands, retailers, and service providers in the CPG industry, drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com. That's again, contact@cpgguys.com. Maybe you can join us on the podcast for a lively discussion. Don't forget to drop us a rating at cpgguys.com on the navigation bar up top. That shapes and lets Peter and me understand how we did. Do we have the right conversations with the right folks here on the show? To our LinkedIn followership, we cannot thank you enough. This show doesn't exist without you. For the clicks, likes, comments, direct messages, meeting us at conferences, coming to our events, parties, dinners, I can't thank you enough. This is not something Peter and I planned for, but it's now our full-time energy and effort. So I can't say thank you enough times. Mark, generous of you to give us time during the holidays. You're always welcome back on the show. Hopefully you will choose CPG Guys as a partner in the future to disseminate a lot of that education and knowledge that you spoke to. Thank you for joining me.
Shri, it's always a privilege and a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity and the platform. Look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future. And in the interim, my best wishes to you and your family for happy holidays. Thanks for everything, Shri.
Happy holidays to you, Mark, to our audience. And that's a wrap of this episode of the CPG Guys.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.